So I want to talk with you about how to use the cultural tension that you've organized your paper around as a spectrum that you can then translate into a thesis. So let's imagine I'm working on a paper about materialism and Christian idealism. And I identify a spectrum here. I've got at one end materialism and at the other end Christian idealism. And as I look at each scene that I discuss in my paper, I ask myself, where would that go on the spectrum? Is that scene an example of Christian idealism, or is that scene an example of materialism? So the four scenes I have so far all seem to pretty clearly be examples of materialism. Miss Watson sells Jim despite her Christian rhetoric. Uncle Silas and Aunt Polly are prepared to return Jim for a reward. These are Christians who in fact are acting on materialist impulses. The Duke, the Dauphin, the selling of Jim, the auction of the Wilkes slaves. These are clearly examples of blatant materialism in the text. And I think it's fair to say that Twain is criticizing that materialism. But let's see how we might turn that into a thesis. I like to think of this as a unified thesis because all of the scenes that I'm discussing kind of have the same message. So my thesis built on that spectrum would be something like this. Throughout the novel, Twain critiques how crass American materialism has undercut Christian idealism, particularly in scenes commenting upon slavery in the antebellum South. So for this thesis, all the scenes kind of work in the same way. Twain is making the same social argument, the same criticism in every example. But let's look at things again, and let's add one scene in there that complicates things. Since your papers are supposed to look at 5 scenes, let's say I have 4 scenes that all align with that idea of materialism and Twain's critique of it. But then I have one scene where I actually see some Christian idealism. Maybe it's the scene where Huck says, well, I'll go to hell then. I'll go to hell to protect Jim. Now I would be looking at a thesis that would have more of a mixed structure to it. So again, I might call it a multivalent thesis, a thesis that makes multiple arguments, a thesis that doesn't see Twain as having only one argument, a thesis that recognizes the contradictions in the text, recognizes the different arguments that can be made at the same time. And so here, kind of although structure works, right? Although Mark Twain frequently critiques the moral corrupting power of material desire in his representations of chattel slavery in Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, the novelist also celebrates the enduring power of Christian idealism in America, etc. Now, I could have, by the way, stopped right there. I didn't have to add that through Huck's decision to defy the ideology of slavery in the name of friendship. I could have stopped the thesis right there, and I would have had a good one. But I guess what I was trying to get at was showing how that one scene is at odds with the larger discussion in the book. Now, again, I'm sorry this keeps doing that. Again, this doesn't mean that these are incompatible ideas. Arguing that materialism corrupts, but seeing an example of how Christian idealism is powerful, they actually work together quite well. But you're not required to have this multivalent thesis. What I'm trying to get at is your thesis should reflect the arguments that you made in your claim sentences. And they don't have to all be the same. You could see Twain making multiple arguments over the course of the novel through 5 different scenes that play themselves out. So yes, it's possible that you could see Twain as having one argument, a unified thesis like this that pulls things all together. But you could also see Twain as having multiple arguments going on at the same time, as this thesis suggests. I urge you to take a look at the sample thesis statements in the rubric for more perspective on this, and also take a look at the sample thesis statement on the sample essay that you have, which is an essay more about, I believe it's Faulkner and James Baldwin than Twain, but the structure of the thesis opens up some good possibilities for you. So now you have lots of tools. You have this video, you have the rubric, you have the sample and the essay. Now it's time for you to draft a thesis and send it along to me as I explain in our course learning management system. All right, So follow the instructions back on the calendar about what to do, how to send me your thesis after you viewed this video. See ya!